Hey guys, real quick before the video actually starts though, I just want to say that clearly if you clicked on this video, you know it's a very long video. We had a very long discussion. I tried to shorten it as much as possible, but I'm still working on it now, so it's probably not going to be that much shorter though. So I would just advise this is the type of video to just play in the background while you're doing something else. If you're playing a video game, if you're eating, if you're, I don't know, jogging or something like that, just go ahead and watch it, listen to it, and yeah, you don't have to focus on it too much. But yes, guys, I hope you enjoy this video, and here we go. What's up, guys? Gojira51 here, also known as Richard Manzo, and today we are going to be debating, once again, which film is better, not who'd win in a fight, Godzilla 2014 or Shin Godzilla.
And I'm Dylan.
DylloFello.
But I'm here to defend Hideki Anno's film, Shin Godzilla, or in other words, Godzilla Resurgence, as I think it's the far superior film.
Alright, and I'm here to defend Godzilla 2014 in saying that it is the far superior film of Godzilla. Which Godzilla is better? So you can go and give your input now, Jeremy.
And I'm just here to be the middle ground, give my input on both sides, because I am a little more leaning towards 2014, but I do see Shin is in ways superior to 2014. I guess we better keep the flow of this going. So I'm gonna ask Dylan, what do you what ways do you think Shin, and why is it superior than 2014?
Well, I think Shin is superior because it's the much more well-structured and well put together film. 2014 has a lot of issues when it comes to overall storytelling, to points where plot holes exist or just random exposition pops up for no apparent reason. One example is, of course, Doc Serizawa randomly telling Errol Taylor Johnson about Godzilla before Godzilla is even relevant in the story. He just kind of tells him about it, especially a guy who has no idea who the Mutos are, who Godzilla is. Shin Godzilla is practically Godzilla comes up from the water, he comes to shore, and now he's the issue. He's the main focus of the film. And Godzilla, even when he only has 60 minutes of screen time, his presence is always still there. While in 2014, even though I'm fine with Godzilla not getting a whole lot of screen time, he was not necessarily the main focus, and he was always kind of put to the background. And so when he kind of came up to the finale and started getting a lot more focus, it just didn't really feel natural to the rest of the film and how it played out. Also, as well, I think Shin Godzilla has the much more better dialogue and characters, and actually has a lot more funnier moments. As 2014, the only funny moment I can actually necessarily think is Cake Every Night and We're Monster Hunters Now, and even then those jokes have kind of dated from their past time. Well, Shin Godzilla, even though a much more serious film, has able to put in some wits in there. Also, as well, the score is far more superior. That's like a part I'm gonna say that's gonna kind of have to be hard to defend on 2014's part. I do think Shin Godzilla's soundtrack is far more superior, even though it does reuse some Akira Ifukube themes. I do think the original score they made for the film is top-notch, amazing. While the CGI, and I will give 2014 this, the CGI in 2014 is a lot more consistent and does look better because, well, of course, it's a decently budgeted Hollywood film, so it's going to have that it's going to have that higher than Shin. Shin has the capability of using this much more smaller budget of $10 billion and do a lot more of it, use a lot more of its CGI than 2014 did. Hell, they even were trying to go for practical effects. They didn't work out the way they wanted, and they went ahead and used CGI, which still turned out pretty decent. Of course, some scenes didn't look the greatest. For example, the evolution sequence when Godzilla was going from his second to third form. But other than that, I think the CGI overall looked good. And also, as well, the cinematography, I think, far beats out, far is ahead of 2014, which is much more creative shots, and also points where it's really close to the characters' faces, which allows to have a claustrophobic angle, especially how stressed out the situation is. And as well, the nice little sequences where we see them reading a book and looking through a computer, and you get to see like the actual words and all like Godzilla's DNA through the computer screen reflecting off, and you actually get to see it in front of the characters, which I think was very interesting. Film seems a lot more creative, even though having a much more basic plot. Godzilla himself is a much more stranger beast in 2014. And while 2014, I do like his design, I do think he was practically the basics of Godzilla origin and character, while Shin Godzilla was trying to recreate 54 while do something new in flavor, especially with the 311 incident throughout the beginning of the film, and doing more new takes on Godzilla, especially with his design. Well, his design is very similar to 54's. It still allows itself to be different. And while, of course, his design, I won't say exactly scary, I do think it is pretty cool. I think the overall concept of the character is scary, with the never-ending threat. And even though you might think he beat him, he always comes out of top through his evolutionary state, showing that when he first comes on land, he just makes legs to push him around. Then he evolves to grow arms and go in a much more upright stance. And then, of course, getting to what we know as his fourth form, I find the Godzilla much more interesting. I find the plot a lot more. Realistic in a way, and actually makes sense for its exposition sequence, unlike 2014, which, like, the random meeting they had for no reason. Like, why is Godzilla being mentioned when he's not even, like, noticed in the beginning of the story, besides seeing the bones during 1999? And Shin Godzilla overall, I think, is the better structured film. It's a basic Godzilla film with new, interesting ideas and much more thought-provoking things, such as the ending and also the little theory Godzilla fans have made through Gore, Maki, and Godzilla.
Okay. So now I'm going to kind of give my remarks on why I feel Godzilla 2014 is the better film. So first of all, you mentioned the plot and the story structure of it. You see, I think that's actually where Shin Godzilla really fails. The entire film is only focused on Godzilla, really, because the characters are so horribly written. They're like cardboard cutouts practically. There's no characterization for them besides Kayako and Patterson, who wants to be the president, and you have Yaguchi, who wants to be the prime minister. Other than that, you have no reason to care for them, and my biggest issue is that Godzilla, as you said, only has 16 minutes of screen time, and only about 9 minutes of that is while he's in his final form, or at least 9 to 10, I would say. And the problem with that is that you're left with these characters who have nothing, and one of your complaints was the exposition heavy, or like the expository scenes of 2014. Shin Godzilla, all it was exposition, because you had no actual character moments. The only character moment that Shin had was when Yaguchi kind of broke down and showed a little bit of humanity, and I think that's really where they should have gone. And I use the word disappointment a lot for Shin Godzilla, because I feel like Shin Godzilla is such a huge disappointment in multiple fronts. For one, the message. They tried to have the Fukushima disaster, the earthquake, the tsunamis and stuff like that, the natural disasters, and I never got that feeling or message conveyed like 2014 did, for example. You had the Mutos cause the Janjira nuclear plant disaster, which is exactly like Fukushima, or even more like Chernobyl, to where you have Joe Brody, who was very much, again, like Chernobyl, to where it could have been avoided, but no one listened to him, and it was caused because no one listened to him. And you have the whole fallout of the city and stuff like that, and Godzilla himself creating a tsunami, furthermore stating the point that he is a force of nature. I think that is very important, and 2014 has superior characters for multiple reasons. First of all, you have a reason to care for them. You have Ford Brody, who he's a bomb defusal expert. He returns home to his family, and he hates his father, or he just doesn't want to connect to him because he feels like he's crazy. He feels like he just can't let things go. But he wants to prove himself, Joe. He wants to prove himself to his son because he feels guilty of his wife's death. There's just a lot of character there, personally, I feel, that is just completely missing in Shin Godzilla. And again, you're left with these boring, bland characters for what? Just exposition about how Godzilla is the most advanced being in the world. But, for the special effects now, the special effects I also have a big problem with, because you mentioned the miniature sets and stuff like that. They actually did use them, and they look good, but the CGI looks horrible in scenes, and they had a budget of $15 million, actually. And, again, you can, it's not a fair comparison, but you have to compare it. And 2014 just blows out of the water in all the ways they used it. And you mentioned the cinematography. The cinematography in Shin Godzilla is just so bland. There's nothing to it. You mentioned the camera angles and shots. This is the largest on-screen adaptation of Shin Godzilla, or of Godzilla, we've ever seen. He is 380 feet, I think. Yeah, and he does not feel it in multiple scenes. Like, when he's walking under the bridge in the little village, he looks like he's about the Showa era size. There's a shot to where he's standing next to a tree. He feels like he's only 20 feet tall there. Or like after the atomic breath scene, to where he hibernates kind of, or lays dormant. The way he moves just is not good at all. With 2014, you have a great sense of scale. Gareth Edwards is great at that. He's great in Rogue One. All of the shots are where a human could actually stand and watch the two monsters fight, whether it's out of a window, inside a car, on top of a building with the military. It's great, and Shin Godzilla also just looks like a very bland film. One of the biggest points I would raise to it is that it has this muggy look to it, and Shin Godzilla is I feel nothing from it. 2014, again, you cannot beat the Halo insertion scene. That is one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a film. The way it's shot, the shot composition of the entire film, as I mentioned, the way the action scenes are shot, has a very kinetic, motion, energetic feel to it. Something that Shin Godzilla doesn't. For the most of the time, it's just very steady shots, and you don't feel that really impactful feeling that Godzilla should have, like he is destroying this entire city. Now, as for Godzilla himself, it's not Godzilla. 1998 Godzilla actually has more in common with Godzilla than Shin Godzilla does, because if you compare them, what Anno essentially did is what Marvel does to a bunch of their characters. You take Iron Man, for example, the new Iron Man. What they did is that they replaced him with an African-American woman. And it's... For the Marvel comparison, what do they do? Iron Man has a iron suit, and he can fly. He can shoot repulsor beams. Everything else is different, though. They change the sex, they change the race and stuff like that. They change the entire character's origin backstory. That is essentially what happened here with Anno, and it's just so far off from Godzilla, so far off from the original 1954, that again, 1998 has more in common. They're both the same, just on opposite ends of the spectrum. One tried to be super realistic, the other tried to be the most anime thing you could make it. And that is the biggest point to where it falls. But you mentioned the soundtrack. Now, here's my problem with the soundtrack. This is one of the most realistic films that have ever come out for a Godzilla film. And it has this very dark and dreary tone, like, it's helpless. I love Persecution of the Masses. I love, Who Will Know.
Will Know.
Mm-hmm. And, what's the other one? I can't think of it.
Defeat is No Option, Black Angels.
Black Angels, yeah, I like Black Angels, and, okay, I like some of those. But then you have something like Kyosutai, you have Organization Formation, Early Morning in Tokyo. A lot of those, like, Kyosutai sounds like it should be in a Pokemon game, or something like a very action-heavy 80s movie. And you have, or the very end one sounds like it should belong in a Wii game or something like that. And Organization Formation they use 5 times throughout the entire film, and it is so annoying, it drives me nuts. That's my biggest problem with Shin Godzilla, the consistency, the special effects. Not consistent at all. The night scenes look great, day scenes look like garbage. You have the characters. There is no consistency there, because there was no characters to begin with. They're just very bland and generic. And the cinematography, sometimes there are good shots. I'll say that about Shin Godzilla. Sometimes there are, but they're very far... There's just... Shin Godzilla is very inconsistent, and 2014 is much more consistent, I feel.
And your response to that, Dylan?
My response... Well, to go in with the whole Godzilla, that 1998 has more common with Godzilla, because that's the thing that kind of, in a way frustrates me personally, because it's fine for a character to be different. I'm all up for something different about a character. I'm all up for something to be, oh, they changed this, they changed that. Especially with the origin of Godzilla in this film, I'm perfectly fine with it. I can sit down and say, oh, that's an interesting take. It actually works with an actual real world event, which is the 311 thing. To go on with that, this Godzilla is Godzilla. He has all the traits of the character. Now, of course, he adds some things new, and he also changes some things, but the character himself is still Godzilla. He has the human-like stance, he shoots atomic breath, and he doesn't get phased by bullets. Now, of course, there is that one scene where he does get hurt by bunker busters in the back, which, yes, I would say some Godzilla it would be understandable for some Godzilla fans to go, ooh, ah, but the thing is, Godzilla immediately heals from that. Yes, he gets hurt, but with that, he grows a new defense defense mechanism, and as well he does heal from that, especially shown in the part where one of his spines actually fell off and it's actually growing on its own. It's becoming its own organism. So while this Godzilla does do something different and does change the character very large, it still respects it. While 1998, for example, completely changes the structure of the monster, only gives him 2 rows of spines. He doesn't even share the similar skin texture. His origin, well, yes, again, Shin Godzilla is a different origin. Its origin doesn't make any sense because the French, their only nuclear bomb test was underground. It was never overseas. So the whole origin all by itself doesn't make any sense because that event of French using nuclear bombs never happened. So the origin never actually is consistent with the real world it is in. Now, with Shin Godzilla, when it comes to overall addressing real-world events, like you mentioned the whole Chernobyl thing, I could get that. But with Shin Godzilla, it's very clear by actually recreating real-world footage and sequences and like real events, such as the one of the Prime Minister saying, "Oh, it's fine, it won't happen." Then they mention, "Oh no, this actually has happened," and it all happens on live TV. In real life, he's saying it won't, like the nuclear plant won't explode. Then the guy walks up to him and says, "Oh, it did." And he's like, "Oh." And in Shin Godzilla, they reflect that through Godzilla walks on land. Also, as well, when Godzilla is walking on land, it reacts to multiple the flood sequences and such. And also, it shows the government's failure to reassure their country's safety from a natural disaster event such as Godzilla himself. Which is something that even though 2014 did have that Chernobyl-esque, it never really went anywhere with it. It never really went anywhere at all. While in Shin Godzilla, they realized their failures in the beginning, and so when Godzilla comes back, the Prime Minister goes ahead and agrees on the usage of using military force against Godzilla, while at the last time, 2 citizens blocked him from doing that. Now, with Godzilla 2014, while yes, there are some characters that do have some really good personality, the reason why I don't necessarily like them is because mainly of course, there are a few, like Ken Watanabe and Bryan Cranston, they are perfect. But the main character, Ella Taylor Johnson, the one we focus on the most, he's literally the most convenient player. He's literally the most convenient person ever. Every situation he has is just pure convenience.
Is it really, though? Like, what scene specifically are you saying? And also, just so you know, usually what happens is that we have our opening statements, and then if you want, we can talk back and forth now. That way we're not just waiting forever, if you want to do that.
All right. What scenes I'm specifically talking about with Godzilla 2014, and it's like, oh man, it gives me a headache. All right, so I can understand, the nuclear plant that his father worked at got taken down. All right, that's fine. That allows some character development. It's fine. But then as we go on, it starts getting really, really convenient, and you're like, not this person is so unlucky. Like, he goes to Janjira with his father. And they find them there, and when they take him, this is when the film starts at least picking up, but then it gets really, really convenient. Once they do get there, once our main character gets there, that's when the male Muto decides to hatch, which I'm like, all right, that's a little out there, but that's fine. But with this, it continues on, and his father dies from this. Then, and I got to say, the Honolulu sequence and everything about that is a great example. Then Dr. Serizawa chooses him. Now, for no reason whatsoever, Dr. Serizawa chooses a character that has no idea who these creatures are or anything like that, and he tells him about Godzilla, which isn't even relevant in the story yet. Godzilla doesn't show up or actually becomes part of the story once Honolulu comes in. So once he gets back, he gets on a train. Conveniently, at the same place he's at, the Muto was there. Muto is at Hawaii. Now, when the lights go back up, conveniently, the Muto's right in front of the train and destroys the train they're on. That's like a really just, why is that so convenient? And then we go to San Francisco. His place he lives at is being attacked by giant monsters. That is just like total, why is this guy so unlucky? And even when the monsters are fighting, his wife is an underground shelter right next to where the monsters are fighting. And when the sun is on the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, Godzilla appears and destroys the bridge where the kid is on. It's just okay. Now also as well when he's on the boat, Godzilla conveniently shows up and saves him. There's another thing. Godzilla just pops up out of nowhere and saves him. Well, that I can excuse because it did lead on to a good moment, and at the same time, the Muto was there, so it would make sense why Godzilla would save him. But I would expect at least the Muto not to waste her time and actually kill the guy and take the nuclear bomb instead of just staring at him.
Okay.
Now, and also, when he's about to die with the female Muto, when the female Muto notices he destroyed the nest, Godzilla just out of nowhere just decides to pop up and use his atomic breath for the first time, conveniently saving the character.
Okay. Now, I have a few things to say. First of all, the Janjira one was convenient, but when they go back to Janjira, that was not just a convenience that the male Muto appeared again, or decided to. That was the selected date that Joe Brody actually did, because you remember he was having the readings, like the seismic graphs readings and stuff like that. He said they're the same readings that they were on that day, so that's why he wanted to go there. He wouldn't have gone there if it wasn't the same, but because he kept hearing those noises, he needed to go there. So that's why the male Muto hatched at that point, and the reason why Dr. Serizawa then picked Ford Brody after Joe Brody died was because he was sitting there in the interrogation scene as he was, explaining to him how the readings were the exact same, and how much knowledge he really knew about all of the stuff that was going on. So he wanted as much information as he could get out of Ford Brody. And the reason why Dr. Serizawa actually brought up Godzilla is, I gotta ask you, did you read the Godzilla Awakening comic book?
No.
Okay. Well, in that, what happens is that, I'm not going to spoil it, but the whole premise behind that is that it takes place, or it tells the story of Dr. Serizawa's father, and how he tells him about Godzilla and all of these other things, and how Godzilla fights the Shinomura species, which is similar to the Muto. So he knows that Godzilla is going to appear, and it further proves that more into the Hawaii scene, with the flooding. And that's why he tells him that, because he knows that Godzilla is going to come just like he did in with the Shinomura, which also appeared at the very start of the film. You don't see it, of course, but at the beginning of Atoll Islands in the comic book, that's where they kill the Shinomura, and Godzilla survives, of course. But, and then on to the Honolulu scene. That is convenience, I'll say. That one is very convenient. But given the trajectory of from the starting point of Japan to then San Francisco, it made sense for where the Mutos were going for their nuclear devices, because the trains were on the move. And that was another thing. The trains where he was then attacked, Ford Brody, that was because the Mutos, of course, were tracking the nuclear missiles, the nukes. So they attacked it, and he survived. And then the whole rest of the San Francisco scene, he was there, of course, because he had to disable a nuke. So I feel like a lot of that wasn't convenience. And, of course, the Godzilla 2014, him using the atomic breath for the first time. Did you read the novelization of 2014?
No.
In the novel, which is also canon, the same as The Awakening is, it mentions how Godzilla uses the atomic breath in the first encounter with the male Muto. We don't see that in the film, but they say that he does. And if you'll notice, when he's fighting the female Muto one-on-one, he pins her to the ground and, kind of rears back a little bit. That's because he was probably going to use the atomic breath there. But it made sense also for him to not just use it for the first time, but also to attack the male Muto, because when the male Muto went to go check on the nest, when the female Muto went to, the male Muto was beating on him, but then he left to also go check on the nest. So that allowed Godzilla to have the time to get back up and fight. So all of it, I don't think, is sheer convenience. I think there's reasoning for most of it.
Well, even though you did give some good explanations, I do kind of feel like the addition of Godzilla Awakening, which I do know what happens. I haven't read it, but I do know what happens. For what I know, it's not really well written. For one, Doc Serizawa, the one we see in the film, was born in the Hiroshima bombing, and he survived it. So that would make him at least 69 years old, and the 2014 continuity,
and
which he doesn't necessarily look like it.
That's not too far off, though.
But yeah, but he looks like he's like in his early 50s or mid 50s, not like in his late 60s, about to turn 70.
Yeah, well, he's 57 years old, so I mean, that's about a decade, I guess. So I mean, it's not too far off, though. That's a very small error, I feel, for the grand scheme of the film.
And I do think, bringing up the whole atomic breath thing that happened in Honolulu, the film never showed it, which funny enough, I actually would expect that to happen in the news broadcast. It's like, oh, this thing just shot like some like weird fire breath. No, they never showed it in the broadcast, which is like, I gotta be honest, it's like, how can you miss that?
Yeah. Well, here's the issue with it. Sometimes things in the novelization, they do take their artistic liberties, so that may or may not have happened. It probably didn't happen in the film, but like for the most part, it follows things like when Joe Brody dies, it talks about how his body was cremated and put out to the sea, since they were on the ship, and Ford was there with it. So like there's a lot of little things like that which they add. The whole narrative is there, so that probably did not happen in the film.
Yeah, and usually I'm the kind of guy who's like, if the movie explains it, that's fine. But if they need to have additional actual other source material to explain something that happens in the film, that I don't necessarily count it, because things can always change and such. Things can always be different. Especially I would say Halo, for example. They really nowadays they base the game so much off the book, so you don't know what's happening. So it's not really well explained.
Is a good example of that.
Yeah.
You need to read up lore just to know what exactly is going on from Halo 4 to Halo 5.
The lore, we're having a deep lore discussion, a serious lore discussion.
See, here's the thing. I don't think you're missing anything from Godzilla 2014 though if you don't read the novelization or the graphic novel, because you do get this sense that, because we saw in the opening scene, of course, with it was Ken Watanabe when he's in the Philippines in 1999. He sees the Mutos, so you have this sense, and also his father's stopwatch. You get the sense that he knows about Godzilla, and that's why he's telling him, because he also went up on the deck. So I don't really think you're missing anything there.
But do you think that out of everyone on there, he did go for Errol Taylor Johnson and just randomly start talking about Godzilla? Now, of course, you did bring up that, he knows Godzilla's going to come up. But at the current situation, Godzilla, there's no been signs of Godzilla or anything. He just kind of brings him up for there's any relevance to him, to a guy that has nothing to do with it. Now, I will say with an issue with 2014 is killing off Joe Brody. Because I do kind of feel like if it was switched around, if it wasn't Ella Taylor Johnson, it was Joe Brody, I probably wouldn't even be bringing it up, because it would make sense. He's directly talking, because this guy, Joe Brody, has been obsessed for this for all his life, ever since his wife died. So it would make more sense if they kept him alive and Duck Serizawa told him about that, except they missed that and told his son that has no idea what all this is, until he just got to the nuclear plant. Even then, he had no idea what was going on.
Mm-hmm. But you see, I think that actually adds to the character a lot, because you remember in the scene when he's asking Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ford, when he's asking, did your father tell you anything? And he's like, no, I just thought he was crazy and stuff like that. I think that really adds an emotional level to the character, that he, in those lines right there, you could read into it and say that he feels guilty for the past 15 years that, he wasted, because it turned out he was right all along, this revelation. And his father's dying words, one great thing that came out of his death is that he said, whatever it takes, keep your family safe. And that is something that motivates the character throughout the rest of the film, the entire film, by, before they do the Halo insertion, he says to the sergeant, he says, I'll do whatever it takes. He repeats that line saying that this is why he's doing it. He's doing it for his father, because I also feel that since the Muto is responsible for his mother's death and his father's death, he despises this Muto somehow, the male Muto. And I feel like there's a lot more character than other people see in it, personally.
But they don't show it on screen as much.
Yeah. Well, they don't really even show it at all. Even when his dad dies, he just sits in a room, learns about Godzilla, and then after that, we don't really see him actually consulting anything about the Muto. And when he destroys the nest, that is the only really sign of it happening is when he destroys the nest. But other than that, everything else is just him doing what he's supposed to do as someone part of the military, trying to defuse the bomb or get it out of there.
But
it looks better on paper, but the way they displayed it on screen, it does. It honestly, I'll agree with Dylan on that one.
Yeah, it was poorly done. There's only one sequence where we ever got actually some. Even then, it wasn't really done well, but we got a little bit of in a way reaction to that. But even then, you could have just summed that up as, he just doesn't want more of these things, without having an emotional attachment to the sequence.
But you see, that's something what are your thoughts on when he says, I thought he was crazy and stuff like that? Because I really think that scene really does convey that he felt guilty in the tone he said it, the actual dialogue of it. What do you think of that, though?
What I think of that, well, for one, I don't think Errol Taylor Johnson's that great of an actor. He was probably the worst. He was probably the worst Saint of 2014. I'll say that. I never liked him as an actor. He did a horrible Russian accent in Age of Ultron. I'm so glad his character died. I'm so glad we're not getting any more of him. Yeah, he is the worst part. So when he said that, yes, there did feel like some weight, but because of Errol Taylor Johnson with his not so good, he's just not good at acting. I never really got the feeling of any emotional weight because Errol Taylor Johnson never gave it. And I understand he is part of the military, but his dad died right in front of him. Even though they kind of show it that even his voice was kind of eager, all he did was rub his head. All he did, like right after his dad's like practically dead at the point, he just rubs his head.
But
that's all he does.
I feel like that is actually a more realistic take on it, though, because a lot of times in movies you'll see someone crying and stuff like that, but in those moments, a lot of times people, they sometimes don't really feel anything. They just kind of, they just have to think about what happens next, not really being able to feel one emotion. So I think he really conveyed that well, like to that point, a more realistic stance. But more onto like why he feels guilty. At the very beginning, he also says, every time I let him in, he just tries to drag me in more and more, and I can't do that. I really think that does kind of build up his character and how he feels guilt over. I just feel like he feels guilt over his, not believing in his father.
But they don't show it on screen as much. Like
it's very bare bones of an emotional sequence.
I would say,
once his dad dies, he never really gives anything after that besides maybe like 2-3 words of dialogue and doing the action of destroying the nest. Other than that, he just kind of seems, I'm an army dude. I'm going in. I'm gonna find my wife. I gotta get in there.
I think the whatever it takes, the line that he repeats, really sells that and drives that home.
Also, when I saw her in there, I think what should have been better is that she should have died, and he found her body after that, because I would have added like that emotional weight the movie really needed. Because the movie, like the only emotional weight it had was the very beginning and Bryan Cranston's character dying, but then after that, everything was just, we're hunting monsters now. Like it changes tone after the first quarter of the film. Not first quarter, the first third of the film.
Yeah.
And once that passes, it just turns into a monster movie.
I can understand that, but I don't, like, I see where you're coming from. I don't feel that, though. I feel like he's not doing this to be the military guy, because in the scene where when he asked, to get on the train, he needs to get to the city, the guy says this is an Amtrak. He's doing it for his family, not for, I'm a military guy, I need to do this. He's really doing it to protect and save his family, and I really think that's what happens. And the whole message of the movie, if you really look at it, and a lot of the like Showa Godzilla films, for example, which Gareth Edwards really took, kind of drew inspiration from, the whole message of the film is family. Having a broken family with his mother dying, with his father dying. Now his whole family is split up. He needs to get across the country to them. In the end, I feel like killing the wife would have kind of contradicted the whole, or just not. It would have messed up the whole message of the film. It would have felt too, like, I'm going to take this from you. That way you feel sad.
It's not much of a payoff. Like, you're looking for a payoff when it comes to him trying to get to his family. And if his wife just dies, then it's like, it kind of just leaves it a little bit of a hole in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like again, it just kind of pulls the rug out from under you, because that's the whole point of the film. That's the success, for him to get to his family and for Godzilla to kill the Mutos. And I think that's where the character aspect, that's where it's good, because again, the whole point is that now he has his family back.
But because the actor, I think that like it just doesn't feel like he's doing it for his family. Like he's obviously doing it.
Yeah, it just never feels like it. Like in the Honolulu sequence, yeah. It has that, but then it all nowhere like shifts tone to him with this Asian kid.
Yeah.
That is stuck on the train. Like it's like no longer the focus on his actual family. Hell, I think he had far more better interaction with that kid than he did his own son.
I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that. But
like, I got to get home. Oh wait, there's a random kid that just got stuck on the train. Okay, I'm gonna change my priorities here. Oh look, a giant monster, super convenient. Okay.
I feel like if they would have more family time between the family, then you would be able to get behind him and be able to feel like more bad for him that he's not with his family and trying to get back to them. But without that emotional weight, it doesn't. You're not really excited for him to see his family. Honestly, like I didn't really care, in a sense.
I think one of the things that they say early on of the film is his son says, are you still going to be here tomorrow? Because he was gone for 14 months. So that line I think is good. And for the Asian kid, that's a reflection of his son. And once again, the family message, he reunites the kid with his family, just like he needs to reunite with his family.
I kind of feel like when he saved that kid, it has that kind of Hollywood trope where like, oh, you gotta have the main character save a kid and make him feel like the protagonist. Well, in Shin, they kill a kid in the first destruction sequence. They kill him when the building tips over, and I'm like, that I like because it's just like, no, we're not that Hollywood stuff. We're gonna kill a kid right in front of you.
There's one issue I have with Shin Godzilla, kind of shifting topics, but actually, hang on. Before we do that though, even though we're talking like how the main character isn't as great in Godzilla 2014, what does Shin Godzilla really have to offer in terms of character? Because I can't, again, there's only two things I can remember from certain characters. We had all these things to say about these characters, but what do you have to say about the characters in Shin Godzilla?
Well, we have Hiromi, the nerdy college student that has not the right social norms. And one of my favorite moments actually is when, in the very end, when they actually freeze Godzilla, because usually she's kind of stiff, you know, straight up, kind of like brick wall of like full on this is and that. But the part I really like, and I gotta say this, the thing with Shin Godzilla that I like and also don't like is when they tease character development. Now with this, it helps, but it doesn't help. It helps because it allows us to see these politicians that you would expect to be full on, like these politicians straight up that you think full on would just be like, we got to do this, we got to save Japan. But then you see these peaks of characters that actually shows kind of a humanity. And one of my favorite parts in the film was in the end when they realize Godzilla's frozen and Godzilla's going to be frozen for like a couple months. She says that at least citizens of Tokyo will be safe. And then this little smile appears on her. And then it's just like so satisfying because you finally can see this character that has just been full on. Oh, man, it's kind of hard to describe it.
She's like an introvert. She's very
yeah, that's what she is. She's like a smart college student that is like kind of robotic in the sense of how everything is good, which to me is a positive because it kind of gives her that character trait. And in the end, she notices. In the end, you just see that smile and you just see like humanity in that. And then you get the little quiffs of like the new prime minister with this like soggy noodles, and you get the stinky shirt sequence. And while I like those, the issue I do have with that was. It's just like, if you're going to tease us a little bit character development, at least give us a little bit more or just don't give us all, because then you kind of get this little like middle ground where you're like, I do like you gave these characters, make them feel human instead of the average politician, not the generic politician, which to me, to be honest, when it comes to politicians, I do prefer I do prefer when you make the politician just kind of straight up like, you know, the typical one, but then you get the peaks of personality, and that's what I kind of feel like that would happen.
Yeah.
In this sense.
I agree with you that they bring these things up, but they never lead anywhere. They never go anywhere. They kind of drop them, and they're like, there's your character, you know, you gotta like this guy. This is how you like him. But also, what was the girl's name? The introvert?
Hiromi.
Yeah, that's right. One of my problems with that is that what led her character to really, you know, to come out a little bit more, because there's no like little things she makes like smirky remarks, because she's the one who says that his shirt smells, right?
Yeah. There's an aroma in this room. Change it. He doesn't even take a shower. He just asked for a new shirt. What a dumbass.
At least he uses deodorant. But
where's you know, that's out of everything Ford Brody did, at least he was able to change clothes and actually take a shower, right? You know?
Yeah, really. But like, that's my problem, is that sometimes these characters do grow very minorly, but there's no really like reason to. You never see the growth actually happen. It's just like before and after, you know?
Wait, so Dylan, are you getting behind that Shin Godzilla has better characters, or did 2014 has better characters?
Well, with overall how it's set up, you do kind of get these characters that all are in a sense part of the same. And also one of the references I do like is that during the Fukushima nuclear plant, they have this little group called the Fukushima 50, which were 50 people who volunteered, people who decided to actually help save Japanese lives by not having this nuclear meltdown. Having this nuclear plant meltdown, and that's what they did. And in Shin Godzilla, they have this small group of people, just like the Fukushima 50 team. They have a small group of people who are there to try their best to figure out a way how to stop Godzilla, just like they did with the nuclear plant. And I like that. It's a nice little reference to the real world, and that's why it kind of makes me like them, because you just get this small little group working for an objective, and they finally make it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I like that, but I just wish they would have gone more with it. Like to bring up Godzilla 2014, I mentioned they have like again like the Fukushima disaster or more Chernobyl. Actually, do you know a lot of the history of Chernobyl of like how it was caused and stuff?
Man, it's like I'm a big fan of like nuclear things, but yet
Mm-hmm.
for some weird reason I never study on Chernobyl.
You should. It's actually really interesting. But
I just know that place is inhabitable for multiple years. And one of the
yeah.
things I do wish Godzilla movies do now is make it where every time Godzilla uses his atomic breath, he contaminates an entire area for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I want that to happen.
that would be a nice touch. But like Godzilla 2014, as I mentioned, Joe Brody, he saw these seismic anomalies, and if they would have responded to it's kind of similar to what Shin Godzilla tried in the way that they did not respond to it the way they should have, and a disaster ended up happening, you know, and his wife died in the result of it, and it all could have possibly been solved if not for if they listened to him, you know. But everyone called him the American maniac and stuff. You know, he kind of made fun of that himself. But I feel like that's, I'm not going to say stronger, but I feel like that is a strong tie to the Fukushima disaster, or more Chernobyl, because you know the whole city is inhabitable. But then you have the tsunami scene.
I will say this when it comes to like the beginning when the nuclear plant, there's like an earthquake. No one really kind of calls him out on that. He just says that like earthquakes are this like one thing, but this one's jagged, this one's like moving, and people even notice that. And then right after it happens, you don't really kind of get this like space of, because that's why I like with Shin Godzilla, you actually get to see like people not listening to this character, and then it happens ways to do it, like, oh, should we capture it? Should we kill it? And then they come, we should kill it and such, and they don't know how anything works. Is that it won't walk on land? It walks on land. Everything they say that won't happen happens. I really like it. On the film, it's only mentioned once about the earthquakes not working right. The nuclear meltdown falls apart. Now, if you're talking about scenes later, yes, and that mostly goes with everyone around him, because the Muto, no one knows of the Muto's existence. While in you know Shin Godzilla, there's actually evidence of like, you know, Godzilla's tail coming out, and then his tail does come out. While in this one, only Ford Brody is diving. No, not Ford. Only Joe Brody, besides obviously a few other people that are like, because kind of like when you see this, you do expect more people besides him looking into this stuff. But when he gets there, you know, he's just like, oh, what's happening this, what's happening that, and such. And then the Muto hatches. It's like there was nothing really anything to prevent, and even then they even tried to kill it, and they thought they did, but it came out. While in Shin Godzilla, there's actually build up to the monster and the government's fallout when it comes to reacting to it.
And one thing that they could have done though is that they could have evacuated the whole city. And you get at the very beginning of the film, he's talking to I can't remember his boss's name, but you know, he's saying like he has prior knowledge of this. Like I think he says he's been tracking this thing for days or weeks or stuff like that. So people do have knowledge of this, and it just kind of proves that it's furthermore people just putting it off. And yes, maybe they couldn't have stopped the Muto, but they could have evacuated the city, they could have evacuated the plant, and again, they chose not to listen to him. And the same result happened like it did in Chernobyl or Fukushima, kind of similar, you know? But I want to talk a little bit about the tsunami scene. That is a great scene, I think, to just showcase how Godzilla is a true force of nature, because a lot of the complaint, I actually want your opinion on this. Do you think, because Godzilla is kind of conveyed as a hero, do you think that, did you like that or did you dislike that?
Well, the thing is, Godzilla has been a variety throughout many years, all right? You got him as a metaphor of multiple things, and such as a metaphor of the nuclear bomb, metaphor of the Cold War, metaphor of the 3/11 event. You also got him as a father, environmentalist, a hero, all of that. And he was never really portrayed as a hero, more in the way as, oh, he's just an animal doing his thing. So I never really had an issue with it, but I am a kind of guy who wants to kind of stray away when it comes to Godzilla being in a terms realistic, because this Godzilla was actually acting like a real animal. Now, of course, people would like that. I'm personally the type of guy who's like, make the world around Godzilla realistic. Well, Godzilla's a thing that stands out from everything, which would kind of give a better effect, because all the characters like, how does this thing exist? But when you see 2014 and how he does, you get how his motivations are, you get how his body works and such, which I would say isn't an issue. I just prefer the more crazy, unrealistic Godzilla. While 2014, I think, is a cool addition to Godzilla of having that more realistic, animal-like sort of creature design and also in behavior. I personally prefer unrealistic Godzillas. While at the same time, I'm perfectly fine with this new portrayal of Godzilla while still respecting previous films before. Because 1998 tried to be realistic, even though it made zero sense. Because why is a cold-blooded creature going to cold and rainy New York to lay eggs? They should be much more in a humid or tropical area to do it. Except they just go to New York. Out of all places, just go to New York.
Yeah. Oh, and that's another thing I actually meant to bring up, actually, the 1998 thing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
We should talk about that and then end it soon, because this has been going on for like over an hour, and I think that if we want to continue it, then we can do it in another one.
Because that's the one where I'm just like, okay, that crosses the line a bit there.
Okay.
That Richard, no, you can't make that comparison.
I will make that No, but actually, also Jeremy, we can actually keep it going a little longer, depending on how much we want to actually talk about it. We can just cut it down or whatever, or it can be a longer video. But
true. I mean, I think we should go for another 15 minutes because I do need to go. But I don't want to cut it now because this part is definitely something that you guys.
Oh, this part is going to get juiced because it's like you're comparing to something that was purposely trying to disrespect the character, and the other one is trying to reinvent the character while still respecting other continuities. Like what?
Okay, so. Well, let's just take everything at its basic level here, okay? We're not talking about the story. We're not talking about the I guess real life, the realisticness of it. Let's just take it as
realistic.
Let's just take it at the origin, though. The origin, he was directly related, much like the original Godzilla in 1954, because they theorized he was a irradiated Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's what Dr. Yohanda proposed. He was a radiated iguana from the nuclear testings. Now, that might not have happened in real life.
From France. From France. Like, all that was underground. It never was above ground.
Yeah, exactly. But, again, let's just take it at its base, and then he becomes this giant monster. Now, you said, he doesn't stand upright. He walks more like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But
yes, and he has like 2 rows of spines. He has a big, fat, square head with a J little chin.
I think he actually has... I think he has 3 spines, or 3 rows of spines.
No, he has like 2. He has 2.
Okay. It's been a while since I've watched the film. But now, here's the thing, though.
I don't want to watch it if you're comparing it.
What?
You're going to put it as a comparison. You might have wanted to watch it again.
Okay, I mean, come on.
Yeah, my dude, your argument's flawed. Get exposed.
No,
Rant incoming.
But
rant incoming.
Okay, but back to my point is that now, what did Godzilla 1998 add? What it did was it just took Godzilla to a very realistic level, and it made him,
which failed at because cold-blooded creatures should not be going to cold, rainy New York.
But I mean, just it had the essentials of Godzilla. He was a dinosaur-esque creature. He had the spines. He had some sort of atomic breath. He had flammable breath, or like somehow was fire. It's kind of vague, but
it's confusing. Like there's it's obviously not, but at the same time it could be, and it's just like, and you're in this weird limbo if you don't know if it is or not.
Exactly, but he had he laid eggs. He's asexual, but Godzilla has miraculously had a son before, so it's not the first time, and it's a different idea.
But he never gave birth to it, though.
Didn't they say in the film that Shin Godzilla is asexual as well? That he could
well, in a way, in terms of like starfish-esque, you take a limb off, it grows another one. Which I do like because it kind of takes the regeneration idea of Godzilla and just expands on it, where this thing's never-ending threat. You make it bleed, it grows others.
Yeah, but so here's the thing, though. What did it add, and what did it really take away? Because did Zilla have 3 other forms? Did he have a weird, goofy form where he was actually on all 4s? He was not upright at all. He was on all 4s. He had very goofy eyes and stuff like that. He was
the second form was never on all 4s. He didn't have arms yet.
No, but the first he was he was in a downward position. My bad. But,
he just used his feet as like kind of like propellers.
Yeah, like the little stubby arms. My bad. But so yeah, they added 3 forms. He had like a turkey form, and then he had the other form, and like also now we're getting into the insane stuff. His jaw splits in half like Otachi from Pacific Rim, and it expands like the Indominus Rex. I'm fine with the purple atomic breath. Honestly, I love the color purple. Jeremy and I both love purple.
Well, that's Hidekiano's thing. He's obsessed with purple beams.
Yeah.
You know, it was like it was an Evangelion. It was in his little like God warrior comes to Tokyo, and then you get Shin Godzilla. It's like everywhere.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that. I love that, but it went too far with the back spines, the dorsal fin spines, and the tail spines.
I think the back spines are fine, just because it's like, oh, that makes sense, because that's where he charges up at. So, and that's like an exposed area. But I will say the head, like not the head, the tail, like while it never bothered me and it was only shortly used, and I kind of get why it was there. At the same time, I would say compared to the 2 other usages of the beam, it was a little like, whoa.
That was very tacked on, I feel. Like.
No, I think it was more in the way of defense. Like, oh, he's running out of radiation, so he instead of just wasting it through his back, he just puts it into his tail. So it's a better way of taking out threats.
The what? What, Jeremy?
The tail didn't seem effective though.
No, it had.
No, it did. It took out a couple of drones.
Yeah, but again, it had like maybe like 30 seconds of screen time collectively total. Like that's one of my issues. Like. Things just feel very added for no reason. And okay, here's another thing though. Again, you were mentioning in the deleted scenes and in the concept art, Godzilla would start growing and reforming and stuff like that. Zilla did not add that.
Deleted scene.
Yeah.
Wait, deleted scenes. What?
Yeah. There was a deleted.
Growing reform.
Yeah, you remember like when the MOP bombs, the massive ordnance penetrator bombs from the B-2 Spirit bombers.
Yeah, I do know that, but no, in the film they did explain by looking at his dorsal spine that was actually was in the rubble. Not because there was a deleted scene, but there was in the film the one we see. They do explain that it is actually grown on its own.
Yeah, I know, but like they actually. In the deleted scene, they just have like the.
It's an alternate cut. That was like one thing that they were going with, and then they changed it. Which I don't know why. I think the other one would have been a lot more cooler.
Yeah, it looked a lot.
It was way more cooler. That is one thing I did point out. Like that would have been something like I would be interested in.
And but that's my point though. They changed the character a lot at its base. Like the actual origin of him does not actually even come from the nuclear bombs. It comes from nuclear waste. But Zilla, while it did not, while I'm not saying which is a better film here or which has better characters, I just think that Zilla has more in common with the original Godzilla 1954. Like let's take for example, can 1954 shoot 19 lasers out of his back? Can he grow and reform from a single cell or whatever? Can his jaw split in half? Can his, does he have an entire mouth on the end of his tail? And in the concept art and stuff like that, can he turn into a humanoid? Does he have humanoids growing on his tail? That's my point here, is that it completely changed it. And I think Anno he should have been involved with the Godzilla anime because it was very much anime-like. Even in the music, even in the tone. Like, it just had a very anime-ish feeling to it. And like halfway through the film, or even in the beginning with the forms, I was like, I don't feel like this is Godzilla. I feel like it's missing something. And the scenes where Godzilla is just walking and destroying things, I was on board with that. But the forms, I did not like. The excessive back lasers and the tails and the jaw splitting and the humanoids, I did not like because that did not feel like Godzilla. Zilla, as much as he may be very depowered, he still, I'm not going to say felt more like Godzilla, but he had more in common with Godzilla. That's my point here.
Now, I have to strongly disagree with that because Zilla was trying his best, and even like Roland Emmerich mentioned, he didn't like the character. So the character wasn't a way to say, oh, this is the better one, this is the more realistic one. And yet it takes the actual things that we know of Godzilla, that, oh, he runs away from the military, he can actually get hurt by missiles and such. He's not human-like structure. While Shin Godzilla, yes, there are changes, but I'm perfectly fine if a character changes, which if, like I mentioned, if 1998 just kept the design, but he still acted like Godzilla, I would have been 100% fine with that. But with Shin Godzilla, they still treat him like Godzilla. He just has a couple different traits. He doesn't run away from when the military hits him. He's practically indestructible. And yes, those bunker busters did hurt his back, but like I mentioned, the regeneration he has is just like probably the best out of all the Godzillas, because what kind of Godzilla out of all of them can regenerate so like intensely that he could grow other Godzillas?
Probably, well, not other Godzillas, but GMK has an insane healing
Also,
factor.
as well, when it comes to 1998, well, 1998 did have something to do with nuclear bomb. The overall, any bit of radiation, that was it. We never got any mention of radiation. There was no radiation signs of this, of that, of that. Well, in Shin Godzilla, it's everywhere. There's radiation all over the place. They talk about it. That's even the purpose of why Godzilla exists, is because the radiation formed him. Well, you can say the same with 98. Radiation is this Godzilla. That's practically what he's formatted by, which is what the original is also around. When the original came up to shore, he contaminated the entire area, just like Shin Godzilla did.
They mention it though, but we never see any personal effects. Like we never see on the ground perspectives from anyone. The only good one we see is
something I will agree. That is something where I'm like, I have to agree, because even though there are some shots where we see like a guy's leg underneath a car and such.
Well, I think the only good one is the family.
I will agree with you that it even though I do really like Shin Godzilla, I think it's far superior than Godzilla 2014. It does have faults on its own, and one of the things is that it never really got us connected to the people on the ground, the civilians.
And to go back to Godzilla 2014 real quick, I think that's something that the Tsunami Scene really displayed well, is that you see all those people, but then you see them get swept away by this giant tsunami, and they don't shy away from it. You see like you see the family escape, but then everyone else is doomed to hell basically. And it shows that Godzilla is not just a hero, he is a force of nature. He will attack humanity if he has to one day, if they're ever a danger. And I think that's something that is far superior in terms of Godzilla 2014 versus Shin, that you see that on level ground perspective, and just the way everything is shot too. Like you feel the gravity, and you feel the
sense of scale.
Yeah, the sense of scale, the epicness of Godzilla 2014, which you do not get in Shin Godzilla.
I do disagree with the epicness, because like you mentioned earlier about the cinematography and such, I do think it did help out with Godzilla's size. Now, of course, you said, the trees made him feel like 20 feet. Of course, the camera was positioned underneath the trees, and Godzilla was really high up there. And of course, with Godzilla's size, it would make sense, like, he just seems 20 feet. Well, his head's just that big.
Yeah.
You see it, and you're like, he seems closer, even though he's just like this thick thing walking above it. I like the shots in Shin Godzilla much more, because they're much more creative. We see Godzilla far off, walking through houses. We see his tail sweep up in front. We see like a shot of a car coming by looking at Godzilla. The entire military sequence that we see, I think, is far superior than anything in Godzilla 2014. All the shots we see are amazing, and especially when it comes to especially Godzilla being far off, and you just see like all like these tanks surrounding the entire area shooting Godzilla. And I think the nighttime sequence is far superior than like the Kiss of Death, and also as well the Atomic Breath. Not to shame those things down, I'm not saying nothing's wrong with those sequences. They're nothing wrong. They're amazing. I just think the Atomic Breath sequence is a lot more better, because it actually kind of has this unnerving feel to it, especially how Godzilla is during it. He splits his mouth open. He sets an entire city on fire. He shoots a laser out of his mouth and back. And there's practically no way of stopping this thing, and it just gives this feel of hopelessness that I like.
It does, but then to follow it up, what do you have after that? You have that music, that slow jazz, and that's another issue I have with the soundtrack. It's like
Early Morning in Tokyo appeared in the it appeared.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but like that's another thing. The consistency of the tone it is setting is very off point, and you said it's going to be a hard point to argue the soundtrack for Godzilla 2014. I would say I think the Godzilla 2014 main theme is just as good as the best of the original Shin Godzilla scores. That is so catchy. It's so, again, you feel the epicness of it. And here's what I like to say. For every good Shin Godzilla score, there's two bad ones. Like I said, you have Kyosutai, you have, what is it called? Ultimate. You have
I like Ultimate. I did like that. I will say the beginning of Ultimate kind of felt a little weird. It kind of felt like that PlayStation 1S, but then once the chorus came in, once the chorus came in, that's like when it completely actually fills in tone with the soundtrack. It's just the beginning that kind of feels a little off, but then after that, it becomes better.
But I think that 2014 effectively has a better soundtrack because it keeps that, like...
It's more consistent, I find, though. It's 2014. But they play. But the thing about 2014 is, though, they play off the main theme a lot. Like,
yeah,
you hear the same
by the way, I think what you're saying about that, like, they transform it differently, and you just kind of get the same vibe, which could be a plus. Personally, I think what I think about 2014 is, even though the soundtrack objectively is decent, there's not really any bad moments with it. To me, it just feels way too Hollywood generic besides the main theme. When I listen to Godzilla 2014, it just kind of feels your typical Hollywood thing. Now, of course, it isn't as generic as compared to, like, the Age of Extinct, like, not Age of Extinction. Of course, that sounds generic. The Age of Ultron soundtrack, that is like I do not remember a single score from that movie. Well, in 2014, I can actually hear the music and it sounds good. I just like Shin Godzilla more because I even remember in the theater when I heard "Who Will Know" comes on, I actually saying it, of course, to myself without even whispering or even saying a word. No, I mimic the word saying because I just love the hell out of, like, the songs: Persecution, The Masses, Who Will Know, Black Angels, Defeat Is No Option, Ultimate. I like those. I will say Under the Burning Sky kind of hits that 2014 realm of being generic, because even though the one with the chorus sounds good, I will say the one that they did use in the film, not the one with the chorus, because they never used the one with the chorus. They use, like, the one just the instrumental, and that's the one where I'm like, okay, that borders on Hollywood generic. That borders on it. That's like, it's all right, but I gotta say, out of all of these, it's the one that I never really get any sense of a flavor from Shiro Sakagisu with his music.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm not saying that any of them are necessarily bad. They would fit in, again, like a Pokemon movie or in Evangelion or like a game or something.
Well, no,
like
I did like the bum 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 bum
God,
bum,
that,
and
that bugged me so
and that
much
was always used on, like, the because that was used when the military was planning and they were trying to learn things. I like that because that's every time where they're trying to learn something. They're trying to learn something about Godzilla. They're planning. They're trying to do research. It's like kind of like the montage music. I like that because it did work with those sequences, especially how the editing went well with it, because especially when they have that first conference sequence when they got, like, after they came back from the Goromaki ship and Godzilla leaves and they go in and they start looking, you get, like, this kind of, like, Kyoto Patterson is there. She's, like, talking, like, she's with, like, some sass, and then you get, like, the close-up shots of everybody's face, and it's very claustrophobic angle. They see everybody just looking around photos. It was just great.
But I feel like that is very similar to what we mentioned about the Godzilla 2014 theme. How they kind of replay it, but they use that theme 5 times. They had
there's no variety to it either. It's pretty much just the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
Well, no, it is different.
There are varieties.
Each one's different.
But it doesn't sound
the first 3 are about the same. It's the last 2. One has, like, a rock kind of aspect to it, similar to Kyosetai, but then the other one has, like, a very drum heavy one, even more than usual. But the first 3 are basically identical if you just listen to them back to back. But I feel like 2014 again. The tone of that film was very, not necessarily horror or horrific, but it was very.
It was a thrill. Also, I want to talk about something you said a long time ago about 2014's plot realistic because it has conspiracy theories, and I'm like, weren't there 2 Godzilla films like these 2 as prime examples that did the conspiracy theory thing before?
Wait, hang on, sorry. What did I say? I didn't hear you the first time.
I remember on one of your older videos, like before Shin Godzilla comes out, which, by the way, I want to recommend this to practically anyone and you too. Don't make a video saying why this will suck or why this is going to be better until the movies are out. I do want to say that. Because your like Shin Godzilla videos before it even came out, and I'm like, because a lot of your arguments were premature, especially the one where, it's practical effects all the way. They shouldn't do it. And then they confirm, it's complete CGI, motion capture.
Okay. But I will say, most of my arguments were spot on. The characters were very bland. The cinematography was very boring. Godzilla, he did nothing, but like the only time we saw him move was, of course, in the atomic breath scenes. But I want to get back. I don't want to get off on that tangent. What were you saying about the conspiracy theories I said in that video?
Oh, the conspiracy theories, like that. Like, even though you brought it up, and I would say it's like, that's there. But the thing is, there are 2 Godzilla films that did it before, and personally, I do think one did it better. There's Godzilla vs. Gigan. That film did it before with the cockroach, or more in the way, not conspiracy theory, but more kind of like figuring out this or that, trying to
mystery,
uncover that kind of stuff. And then there's Godzilla Final Wars. There's that one, which because the reason why I like Godzilla Final Wars is that they kept the tone right after when they figure out once they figure out how everything's going. Once they revealed it, that's when shit goes down. But with Godzilla 2014, it's just like I need answers. I need that. We never really get invested with the conspiracy theory. He just goes. I need to figure out what's happening.
I feel
and then he figures out and dies.
I feel the complete opposite because I feel Gigan and Final Wars, those went nowhere practically. Final Wars was okay plot twist, I guess, with Akira Takarada. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think that worked out a lot better because we actually had like some setup. Like they even looked at his eyes. They like checked out his blood.
I think the great setup though of 2014 is
and then the twist of like the ex-commander shooting the other one.
Yeah, but I think the setup of seeing Joe's wife die is one of the most powerful scenes of the film, and it's in the beginning, and you get invested into this character. And
but they kill him off, which kind of like
they never really go into like actually him figuring out anything besides, hey, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Hey, let's go to that Janjira. Oh, we got capture. No, I want answers.
I feel they do because they mention how he has a friend who sets up a buoy out there, and if you actually look at the newspaper clippings, on the walls and stuff like that, it mentions a lot of stuff.
Those are minor. Like in Godzilla Final Wars, it shows straight up. I know this kind of becoming a comparison of Godzilla Final Wars, but they show you all the details you need to know of them trying to figure out something. Like, should we trust them? Should we not? And you get to like not slowly, but you get to figure out what their main plot is. While in Godzilla 2014, it's always minor details and never really fully explained.
And that's what I like. I like that more. It's not ambiguous, but you have to read more into it. They're not Christopher Nolan. They're not what?
I said that's just coming down to preference.
Yeah. This is all preference, but
most of it is.
But it's not like the Christopher Nolan-esque where he's literally spoon feeding you everything. A character has to give you a speech every 2 minutes. Like I like the fact that the film challenges you a little bit. Like even with when do they explain? This is such a cliche movie trope, like they do in Ocean's 11. When do they actually really explain what an EMP is? They never really do that. They say, crap, it's an EMP.
But I didn't like that though, because this was kind of like around the time where EMPs were kind of becoming a big thing for science fiction. I'm like, you don't need to explain to us what an EMP is. Mm-hmm. You don't need to explain it. Everybody knows.
That's true.
Yeah, that's the point. They didn't explain it.
And plus, he's telling characters that probably like know way more than he does, and he's over here telling them what an EMP is. So like, do you even know what the monster looks like?
No, you see, he didn't know it was he knew it was some creature. Because it was talking, communicating, but like,
do you know what that is? It's an EMP. It's electromagnetic pulse. Well, you're talking to a group of people that like know way more. Why are you trying to tell them something?
Yeah, I like that though, because it shows he needs he needs to prove himself in some way, and that's the whole point of that interrogation scene. To like, that's what leads him to go to Ford, is that it shows that, holy crap, this guy knows a lot about what's going on here. He used to work here, so clearly he does know a lot about this stuff. So I think it makes sense, but I don't want to get too far into this because all this stuff really doesn't matter as much of the other stuff. So but I do want to get more into the cinematography. The shots in 2014 were amazing because, again, every single shot was where a person could stand. Like where the Mutos fought, there was rarely an occasion to where it was not in an office building or on top of a rooftop or something like that, or even on the ground next to a lamppost or inside a car or inside a shop or something like that. That, I think, is much more creative because a lot of the times, like, remember in the scene in Shin Godzilla to where after he uses his whole lasers and stuff, he's drained of energy and he has to rest. When he moves, I forget, like, the way he moves, the CGI, it's probably just the CGI, but also the composition of the framing of it, it does not, like, that's one of the points in the movie where I'm like, it feels like he's almost human-sized here, because there's no, like, real reference or scale. He's not really against a giant, large building. He was just kind of in rubble next to, like, the sky or whatever. That's why I like Godzilla 2014, to where it always keeps that sense of scale, to where it always keeps that immersion that this is real life. This is where you are. This is where you're standing, whether you're on the Golden Gate Bridge inside the bus, or next to a tank, or right above someone's shoulder. that's why I think the shots are much more like kind of visually interesting and more appealing. Like one of my favorite shots of the film that no one talks about is on the Golden Gate Bridge when you have the school bus and stuff like that. And instead of just seeing Godzilla's spine raise out of the water from the bridge point of view, you actually see it from the bus's reflection of the windows. And that is such an amazing and like chilling scene when you hear that roar he makes. I just think that it's much more visually interesting than Shin Godzilla, because a lot of the time it's a wide shot, which we have seen in so many Godzilla films. And like I said, there are some interesting shots, like to where you'll be following the car or the tail will start to, you know, go in between the buildings. But then you'll have the very basic shots, like to where, again, there's no real kinetic energy or motion, to where it's kind of him just standing there and then the camera kind of pans up. I don't feel anything there, and that's an issue I have with it.
I think Shin Godzilla is a lot more creative with their shots, or at least uses them a lot more. While 2014 does have its fair share of good shots, I will say when it comes to like the human sequences, I could like care less about the cinematography.
Mm-hmm.
Like the human sequences, it just seems boring. While Shin Godzilla, you get these close-up shots to their like heads and such, and it's like this very like nice angle. And what I like about the Shin Godzilla one is that like they always like the camera always, well, of course there's points the camera never feels, but it's always moving to different angles, different shots. And especially when Godzilla first like appears, when Godzilla first comes out of the water, you get like three, 4 shots of him coming to shore, and it's just it is amazing because every shot you get to see the sense of his scale. You get to see kind of like, oh, he's far away. Oh, he keeps getting closer. He's closer. His foot hits the ocean. I also really like when he steps down and you just see the top of the roof flip over, which is something I did wish they added a little bit more in Godzilla 2014, because I like Godzilla 2014, but I never felt like his footsteps ever really did anything.
Ooh,
like
see,
he hurt like
I feel
his
the Hawaii
footsteps.
scene.
His footsteps, you don't really hear his footsteps. I watched the film, and every time I watched it, you never really feel the impactful. You got a character that's known for having these large stomping footsteps, and yet you don't really get much of it. While in
the airport scene.
The airport scene.
the airport scene, there's that. There's that. But in Shin
he...
Godzilla, you get so many sequences with his feet. You get like the sound effect with like 1954 going well with the feet steps and such.
I like it when he pins down the Muto, though. You also like you hear his foot against the Muto, but also against the ground, and you hear his tail hit the ground, and you hear the explosion, you hear the Muto's roar, and you also hear her like try to claw at the building to kind of hold on. I like that aspect to it. You do get those things about it. But what shot of Godzilla do you think really rivals 2014? Because I can't think of a more interesting shot than Godzilla 2014 had.
Oh, I can think of a few. I can think of one. It is like the second shot we see of Godzilla coming in, where like the spotlights making Godzilla have this like somewhat of a faded silhouette, and then you see him with his tail up in the air, wiping around, and then you also see him walking next to the houses and seeing the top of the roofs. Top of the roofs is like flip over and shake. Also a far away shot when Godzilla's walking and he's like stepping on houses, and like that shot actually made Godzilla feel like he was like 1,000 feet. Of course not. Of course those are small houses, but looking at it, it was great. There's also sequences when Godzilla was walking past a building, and if you look really closely to the other the bottom left corner, you can see people running away from all smoke and debris that Godzilla's causing. What I also like as well is the night sequence when Godzilla is like walking by a building, you see his foot come down. Also as well when you see a frontal view, and it's like the one you see in like I would say the second trailer before before he roars and before it goes to him, with the atomic, like his showing off his purple atomic breath. That shot I really do like. I think it looks great. I'm also I will say one thing I'm not a big fan, and like there's only really 2 shots I could consider bad when it comes to CGI and Shin, and it's the evolution sequence and when Godzilla's blood comes out of his back. Like those are 2 shots where I go, okay, that didn't look at all good.
I think
that looked pretty bad.
I think all the blood scenes, in my opinion, really look bad. But and again, like Shin does have some good shots. I will say that.
Oh, and the shot when you see like the city on fire and you see like his beam, like it's a far away shot. I mean, really far away. And you just see his beam just like go whoa.
Yeah, you see, those are the shots that I like the best. Like. The night scenes, but again, it comes down to consistency. I didn't feel that Shin felt super large in the daytime. The best shot, or some of the best shots, again, I will say about 2014 is that it's where a human can stand, but also you have the bus shot with the reflection, but also when Ford first lands, or even like during the Halo sequence when you see like the wide shot of the city and you can kind of see the explosions happening and the Halo soldiers falling. That is such a haunting and chilling, shot. Like it feels like they're literally diving directly into hell, like with the clouds and stuff like that. But when he actually lands, you see the Muto fly by, and then you see Godzilla silently step. And I like that more ominous. You were saying, he's not as loud, and I'll admit he's not as loud except for the airport scene and the other scene with the Muto. But
his atomic breath, like you don't really get any prominent sounds for Godzilla besides his besides his roar. Like that's my issue. There's like too many times where he's like quiet, and even when he does his roar, when he crouches down and he roars at the female Muto, it just kind of stops. And then the Muto does her roar. It just like kind of stops straight up, and then it like shifts to hers.
Yeah, I like that, but back on what I was saying, the shot I really love is when you see him walk from a very ground level perspective. You don't see above him, like you see just about the beginning of his thigh, and he's walking. You see his tail, and then you see another shot of it's his shadow of a building, and you see his spines on the shadow of the building. It adds just such an eerie atmosphere to this to this destroyed city, which we've never seen in a Godzilla movie. We've never seen this ghost town kind of abandoned city where these people are walking, where a monster, a war zone is happening. But I will say, Godzilla 2014's roar is better than Shin Godzilla's roar, because one thing I did not like.
Well, of course, because like it is it's not a stock roar. Well, it kind of is.
It is,
because I usually use the term stock of like free domain, but yeah, technically speaking, it's a stock roar. So 2014 kind of wins by default when it comes to sound design. Even though I do think Shin Godzilla's sound design was cleverly put, I do think his roar, like they could have like at least go with 54 and 84. When it comes to the roar on its own, I do think it's better than 2014 because I kind of got annoyed with 2014's roar because everybody kept using it, especially when the movie came out. Like everybody's like fan film.
That's not the movie's fault though. That's
like
the
I know, but it did get a bit annoying. It did get a bit annoying.
I can understand where you're coming from, but again, that's not the movie's fault. And I do like the sound design of Shin, but a lot of the times, like I don't like the way they use the original scores. I wish I don't know. Have you ever been to G Fest?
No.
Okay, well, if ever you go one year, they had 2 years ago, I think it was, or last year, I can't remember. They had the Symphonic Fury, where a composer played in front of us live the full Akira Ifukube scores, and it was amazing, and I loved it. I wish they would have done that in Shin, because it sounds like they ripped it straight from YouTube. You can still hear the static hiss. I would have liked it if they kept it the exact same, but just re-recorded it, because it would have immersed me a little bit more. But then when I was hearing, I was like, oh, I don't like that. Or even when the explosions were going off, they used the classic Toho explosions. It sounded out of place. It sounded more like the Showa films or the Heisei films. I didn't really feel like it was there. It kind of felt out of place, out of tone, similar to the way the score does, similar to the way some of the shots do. And again, that's what it comes down for me. Consistency.
Also, I do want to mention about the one soundtrack, Good Morning at Tokyo. I forgot what it was.
I think it's Early Morning in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah, Early Morning in Tokyo. You mentioned that was inconsistency, but it was played out after the attack, them trying to rebuild. They even said it they even said it through dialogue, oh, things are this, things are that, we're rebuilding, all of that. And it kind of had that happy moment where, things are getting back to place, everything's getting back in order after the whole disaster. And it kind of had this feel of everything's great again. And of course, they still have to figure out what's happening. They still have to figure out what's going on while everything else is like becoming peachy, and then he comes back and you hear the King Kong vs. Godzilla theme.
I'll say that's not the way I interpreted the scene, but that I'm not going to argue that because that's how you interpreted it. But the thing I am going to argue is that's not an effective way to do it, because an attack just happened. What I think would be a lot more effective is for complete silence. No news reports, just silent, haunting shots of the destroyed city, of people rebuilding, no dialogue whatsoever. I think that would have been much more effective to sell, again, the tone of, there is no God, there is no help, we are the only ones left, because that's kind of the message of persecution of the masses and stuff like that, how, the only thing we can turn to is God, and, we need his protection. But I think that would be a much more effective, that would have been much more effective to not have any music in that scene, to have just that haunting, people are rebuilding,
Well, they did have like the little right after destruction, you just saw and actually I really like this. When you just see it and they're just looking at the path of what Godzilla's second form caused, and you just see like all this damage, and you just see them like just staring out on it, and you see the guy prayer after it. And then, of course, after multiple sequences after that, they then they start playing like the music in a way, because Godzilla hasn't appeared in forever, so it would make sense that as time goes on, things do become better for things do become better for Japan as a whole after the attacks. And it just shows overall how's the country doing, rather than how are like the politicians reacting to everything.
See, that wouldn't make sense for me though, because Godzilla at that point is still on the move, destruction is still happening in the progress, so I don't get that happy aspect to it. I feel like, again, it should be that more somber and haunting and chilling kind of thing, that this is something that is continually happening. This is not a time to just rebuild and count our blessings. This is a time to just keep on trying to stop this unstoppable force. And I'm not saying 2014 did it effectively, because really they're on two different paths, what they try to do. But I feel like Shin, like I said, I don't hate it. It's just a huge disappointment. And there's so many things that went wrong in the film, like the messages. I think that the environmental message was very forced. It was just put in there last second. The whole what was it? The only message, or okay. The government failed, to safeguard the citizens and stuff like that. I feel like that really wasn't conveyed, because at any point did I feel the government didn't incompetently handle Godzilla. They would have handled him just like America would have handled him, or any other country would have handled him.
It's very differently, because Japan runs through a bureaucracy, so everything goes through the prime minister. While in America, we're in an offensive side, while Japan's government is through a defensive side. Offensive, if there was like a giant monster that came up, we would set up, we would actually attack it. While Japan, everything runs through. They run through a defensive. They never run through offensive. They never go out and go to wars. They protect their own land.
I was going to say, one of the only effective things about that was the post-World War II Japan. I really like that, all the red tape, all the restrictions and stuff they have. But again, in the end, this goes back to the personal thing. We never really saw any of the deaths that occurred. I never felt, at least, that the government was responsible for this, because they do attack Shin Godzilla, or they do attack Godzilla. They do try their best, and the U.S. helps them. And the U.S., of course, always wanting to nuke someone, they kind of make us not to be the bad guys, but I just feel like they should have handled it more effectively, to where we see that they completely shrug it off, because once the tail emerged and stuff like that, then everyone was like, maybe Yaguchi's right. Then they took precautions, and they didn't want to open fire because of the citizens. They're always looking out for the citizens, which I think it would have been better to start off stronger, where everyone took this as no problem, and Godzilla then just destroyed everything. There was nothing in place, no military in place yet at that point, because again, we do get the full-out assault, and I just feel like there should have been more tragedy that occurred directly because of Japan.
I think at this point we should end it, though. It's been probably going on for long enough.
Okay, let's end on ending remarks, though. I'll let you go.
Ending remarks.
Shin Godzilla, I still think, is the way better film, and I just think they're like kind of two. They're two films that, even though we did make this discussion, I still can never really compare them. They're like two different end of the spectrums when it comes to tone and overall. So I kind of feel like comparing them to begin with isn't really a good way to kind of source these films. I just think it's more, I prefer this over that. And such. But in the end, I still think Shin Godzilla is the better film. But to me, it just more kind of goes with preference and what I think of it. I like what the film did. I like how the world reacted to it. And while there are aspects of 2014 I do like, I still think that the negatives outweigh the positives. I think Shin Godzilla is a much more well-rounded and well-structured film, while 2014 goes kind of on and off again and such. Go on, Richard.
Okay.
Your finale.
Here's what I want to say. I want to say that throughout all the 61 years that Godzilla's been around, all the way from 1954 to 2014, what really changed in Godzilla? Because I would agree, and I don't know if you would, that the Showa era feels completely different from the Heisei era, and the Heisei era feels completely different from the Millennium era, and Millennium feels different from the Legendary series. But what fundamentally changed about Godzilla? He still remained the same, no addition of forms, no addition of multiple beams out of his back or, mouth out of his tail. What really happened and changed with him? The farthest and most extreme thing was the nuclear pulse and the red spiral beams and stuff like that. But other than that, it kept the same original iconic look and design and the same, again, no other forms, the same attacks. But what happened is that they changed the structure. They had better characters surrounding around him. They had a better story. That's how you change and innovate a character effectively. You don't throw everything out that made the character, and you don't go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to take this and put this to the side because I want to make an anime now. You surround the character with a good story, with good characters, with a good narrative, and a good structure, and Godzilla can stay the same but feel completely different as he did in all of the different 3 eras and the Legendary series included. They completely changed Shin Godzilla, and I feel like it did not pay off because in the end, let's say somehow we got a hold of the CGI or something like that, and we changed the model or something like that, and we changed it to a generic Ultraman monster or Gamera monster. I would feel like that's more fitting than having Godzilla there. I feel like you could replace him with any monster, and it would be a lot more fitting. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy this discussion video. Obviously, this was just more of a duke between Richard and Dylan, but obviously that was what we intended anyway. Because I'm more of in between, and I think that I didn't really need to interrupt at moments when they really got into it, because that's just basically they know more than me in a sense. But I hope you guys did enjoy this, and stay tuned for more.
I also wanted to thank Dylan for coming on for very short notice.
Thanks, Dylan.
It was like
He's still a fag.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you again for coming on though. And yes guys, but thank you guys so much for watching though. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Give it a big thumbs up, enjoy this video. Also guys, go and subscribe to these guys. Tell me who you guys agree with as well. Do you agree with Dylan or do you agree with me? But yes guys, thank you guys so much for everyone being here. Thank you again Dylan so much though, and Gujira 5400 as always, out.